What is the number one thing that you did to become a best-selling author?
I cheated. Okay. I'm joking. So our solution was to put the book on Kindle for free for 3 days. So sometimes there's reading holidays, National Reading Day, National Buy a Book Day, National Stay in Bed and Read a Book.
There's a National Stay in Bed and Read a Book Day?
Pretty sure that Bookstagram has made it up at this point. If there's a reading holiday, Bookstagram has made it up. We found one that was very close by. And we went, okay, we're going to, put the book up for 3 days and maybe it'll get some people getting orders. In those 3 days, we got 18 Kindle orders, which was, really exciting. Miss Kathleen told me, she's like, you might want to keep an eye out on the Amazon charts because usually sometimes if your book gets a lot of pings like that, it will go up the charts. And so I was thinking, oh, that'd be cool. If it would just get number one, that'd be really cool. That's all I really want. At this point, I wasn't even caring about it getting on Barnes & Nobles. I just wanted that little title. Through those 18 orders, it did get up there. There's been memes like, how is every single book a New York Times best-selling book? And I remember when I saw that, I called my publishing director, Ms. Kathleen, and I was like, did I cheat? And she's like, no, all books do that. And I was like, okay. And I was like, so it's like, this legit? She's like, that's legit. And I was so happy.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. If you've been on this channel before or listened to the podcast before, you know this is not my normal voice. Actually, I got a cold recently, and so yeah, I do sound a lot like Scarlett Johansson right now. It's kind of funny. If this is your first time here, I encourage you to just sit on a couch and grab a mug of tea or your favorite book or something, even if it's just a cuddle, and just enjoy a lovely chat over here as we dive into some really fun conversations with today's guest, Isabella Ruiz. She's a best-selling author who's written a book called The Darkest War, which I cannot wait for you to be able to hear more about. And seriously, something that I love about this podcast is that it gives you the chance to feel like you're just across the table from me and my guests, just listening to them as we're all gathered together in a coffee shop or, across my kitchen table even, okay? And we're just able to enjoy some lovely, just writerly, bookish conversations. That's, I think, the best thing about this podcast is that I get to enjoy this really beautiful friendship with all these people and be able to bring it to you, which is just such a beautiful and wonderful privilege. If you tuned in last time, you'll know that this is part 2 of my conversation with Isabella. And today we're actually going to be diving into some really, really good stuff. I'm super excited for this episode because this is going to be answering some of the questions that I was dying to know when I first met her. When she first came to me for the episode, I did some research. I always do research on my guests, whether I invite them or they ask to come on the podcast. And something that I found so intriguing was the fact that she'd had a best-selling book. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it's like a fantasy kind of thing and romance at the same time and royalty setting. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. I want to know how on earth she got a best-selling book. Like, how do you do that? I would love for someone to break it down. And let me just tell you, that was one perk. And she's amazing. Like, meeting her was even more fun. But I was so curious. And that's something that I really do look forward to whenever I'm prepping any of these episodes. I genuinely try to find things that I'm curious about. Because if I'm curious about them, my audience is going to be curious about them. And so that's why I was so thrilled to be diving into this topic, because I really want to know, like, everybody, whether they admit it or not, everybody kind of wants to be able to say, I have a New York Times best-selling book, or, scratch the New York Times, but just a best-selling book. Like, how cool is that? And so just being able to have someone to ask that question to just made me so utterly excited. And so today she's actually going to be answering my question, how do you write a best-selling book, in today's episode. She's also going to be talking about how to do research, especially for fantasy. I didn't realize that fantasy does require research, especially when you're going into like the psychology of the characters and how you want them to respond. I genuinely didn't think about that, but she absolutely did. And so that's why I'm so thrilled for you to be able to listen to that part, and she actually dives into how she did all her research for her books and everything, which I'm so grateful somebody did, because often people are like, you think that they just came up off the top of their head and these authors are so brilliant. No, we're just really good at researching. And so it's so lovely to see someone pull back the curtain and show the behind the scenes of how they created this world and these characters, especially in their psyches. Something else I am so grateful we talked about, because nobody seems to be talking about this. Like, seriously, so many people have hammered into everybody's heads that genre is essential and that it should define your storytelling. You know, and now even with a lot of the tropes that we're all having to deal with, nobody realizes that what makes stories alive and vivid and unique is how sizzlingly original they are. And sometimes that starts with ditching the whole, genre thing at the beginning. We're going to dive more into that, but genuinely, I don't think I've heard any podcasts talking about genre the way that Isabella really dived into that. And then she's also going to be sharing a secret skill that nobody tells you when you get started. And unfortunately, a lot of people find out once they're already in the milieu and once they're already invested in, getting the book out. They don't realize that if they know a little bit of this at the beginning, this secret skill, you're going to get so much farther in life and in your career as an indie author. So without further ado, let's jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And honestly, I love that you did the research and that you allowed yourself to kind of put yourself, I guess, in like the character, like to understand where the character's coming from. Because honestly, that's hard. It is going to be hard for the character, and it's going to be sometimes a little bit difficult for you too, because as a writer, because it's dark. It's difficult. But yeah, I love that you were actually like talking about delving into. I hadn't actually thought about like researching the thing that they're actually struggling with, but that's so true. Like, and talking to people. I found for me, it's really helpful when I talk to people that have dealt with this in the past and just really listening, not only to their words, but sometimes their nonverbal things that they're telling you.
Yes.
And I think that's something beautiful that I've found that some books do, that they give you some nonverbal cues as to how this person feels or how they've reacted to, for example, some kind of a trauma or something like that. And I love that. Yeah, that's so true. I love that.
Yeah, there was a lot of research I did, which some of the topics I dealt with myself beforehand. So it was easier on a lot of these things with this series. One of my favorite authors, and she's one of my instructors at the Young Writers Workshop, Kara Swanson. I was one of her summits that she did back in August, and she said, write from a scar, not a wound. I love that advice. That is not what I did. I absolutely did not do that. And I think that made writing some of the issues in The Darkest War easier. And of course, when I did edits, then it was a scar, not a wound.
Mm.
But when I had started The Darkest War, I really started it because I had been wanting to write a royalty story, but I also knew that I had things I needed to process. And the book helped me a lot. And it's funny, a lot of the research, because like I said, research in all things are great. I remember I spent a lot of research on poisons because a character gets
I feel you so much.
and it was so helpful because you were talking about like talking to people who know things. Did not know a lot about poisons. I'm very into true crime, so I knew the basic stuff, but I wanted my own little thing for my own little book. I wanted something that wasn't so well known. I ended up creating my own fantasy poison, which was very fun. But I did talk to a student who was actually studying poisons like in college. Like that was part of her job.
Like toxicology?
Something. It was something that she had, maybe a minor in something that went along because she was studying criminals and it had poisons and everything. She knew a lot about it. And I had a friend who told me, she was like, my cousin, she's studying all this stuff. You should email her. And she gave me her email, and I could just ask her any question and she just knew the answer. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was great because then I could take all the realistic aspects of different poisons and then I created my own.
That's crazy. I love that so much.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Yeah. Wow. That's so fun.
Yes, it was very fun.
I love that. Isn't it fun though? I actually, veering off just a little bit, it's so fun when you're able to research and actually ask people, experts in your field. I didn't know that that this was something you could do until I watched a class by, I think it was Dan Brown. I haven't read the books, but he had a master class, which was absolutely excellent. So good.
Oh, wow.
So incredible. And one of the things that he said, because one of his books had something about glaciers, so he had to contact an expert on glaciers. And so
Of all things.
of all things, exactly, he's like, where am I going to learn about glaciers? And so he found someone who's an expert on glaciers. And you would be amazed at how excited these people are to talk to you about the things they love. They're like, I have all this information. I could talk about this all day. And I did the same thing when it was about St. Augustine. And because my novel is set in St. Augustine, and I didn't know that much about the history. So I had to do quite a lot of research. I watched documentaries and everything, but there's only so much the documentaries can tell you. There were like specific questions that I was like, I genuinely don't know. And to be historically accurate, I was just not the right person to just put that story in and just assume that things existed or that things were the way they were. And I was just so fortunate to have people who were literally so excited to give me all the info on what people would have dressed in, what they would have done. Like, I even had one person who helped me with what kinds of socks they would have been wearing at the time. I was like, that's crazy. Like, thank you.
I love that so much. And yeah, that's awesome when you can talk to someone who really, you know, directly knows about things. It's awesome. I've heard a lot of people too. They'll call museums. Actually, I've heard a lot of people do this. If they're writing something and maybe a museum knows something about an art piece they're including, or, you know, museums just have a lot of history because they know the backgrounds of certain pieces that maybe existed in certain times. And they'll call like history museums and they'll just ask them questions. And they're, like you said, they're more than happy because this is what they do for a living and they're so excited to talk about it. This is their passion. They made a career out of it.
Exactly. I love that.
Same.
Totally. Because so many times we think as writers we have to do it alone, but we don't. It's
No.
not something that you're supposed to do alone. You have help. If you are in doubt, just ask somebody. They are probably going to be more willing to talk to you than you can even imagine.
Exactly. And it's great too. I've had other people in my writing school. We have on our website or forum that has a resource center. But it's full of students. So you can, if you know about a topic, you put yourself on that list under that topic. And I've had some people like contact me on that forum and be like, hey, I heard that you know about this thing. Can we talk about it? And I'll like question you. And it's really fun.
I love that. That's
Me too.
amazing. That's so cool.
Yes.
But yeah, circling back to like that whole researching like psychology and how your characters are going to face these situations, it's so helpful to be able to kind of step into their shoes for a moment and understand what they're going through.
Yes.
And yeah, I love that you really do want to step into that. And also, I bet it helps to do the research so that you know how to realistically give them hope and a way out.
Yes, exactly. Because if you know what their fears about something may be, you can take the opposite of that and you can give that to them, you know, whether it takes the course of the whole series or they realize it by something, you know, whatever it may be.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bridging now from like drafting the story and writing the story, I would love to hear a little bit about your publishing process.
Oh, wow. This is such a fun story. I love telling this to people. So I've been in theater since I was 12 years old. And when I was playing one of the main characters, bigger characters, I had a lot of making work. I was actually playing the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz.
That's so cool.
Yes, back in April of 2023. And I had to have a makeup artist for all the green. So one of the moms of one of the fellow actors was doing a lot of the makeup work. And I got to know her, you know, through the many hours we spent doing makeup.
Yeah.
And I found out that she had a photography business that she was, you know, she was letting go of it soon, but she was doing a few more shoots before then. And at the same time, I was in the academic program at the Young Writers Workshop, and they were really encouraging us to really take our writing more seriously. And I knew this is what I want to do. I should create, you know, an author account, a Bookstagram, and I wanted professional photos. And so I contacted her. I had her phone number and I asked her if she would do photos. So we set up a time and she did them for free. She was very sweet. And I had photos with my books done and she asked me, are you planning on publishing these? And I said, you know, years in the future, because I'm doing traditional publishing. And I had always been sort of taught, you know, that was the only way you were getting published. And I mean, I had heard of indie publishing, but it was like one of those things that I had always thought of. You do that as a last resort if no one else will publish you. That's kind of how I'd been taught. So, when she asked me that, she's like, well, you don't have to wait years. You could just indie publish it. And I was like, no, I don't want to indie publish. And she sat me down. She was like, we'll talk after the shoot. So after the shoot, she sat me down and she was like, do you know all the benefits of indie publishing? And we talked about the control that you get to have in indie publishing and, and you get to do your own marketing. You get more profit too, actually, because you're not working with a publishing house. And so she basically just talked me through all of it. And it still seemed very far off. And I was like, that's a lot of work. I mean, at the time, I had just turned 16. She had Kathleen Roach, that's her name, and she is the best-selling author of many children's books. And so she knew what she was doing. Her family's been in the publishing industry for many years. I'm pretty sure her parents worked with a publishing house, something like that. So she knew the ground, and she was like, well, I could help you. And it was like, I could actually do this. Because she was like, I could help you. I could mentor you. And I can help you format your things, and I will direct you through everything. And she just made it seem so possible. And I was like, I could really do this. So I never expected to go in there with my silly Lulu published mock cover and of a book and walk out with getting published soon. Because then she was like, well, sales are great around Christmas. We should try to do it right before Christmas. So we published on Black Friday.
I love that.
In November. I didn't even know I was doing this until like August something. And we published in November. And the book wasn't even edited at this time. We were so busy and she worked so much with me. She formatted my book. She made my cover. I mean, all of it, and for free. I mean, she made it so possible. I tell her all the time, I would not be able to do it without you. And it's very true. I call her like my publishing director. And I promise I'm going to put it on a t-shirt for Christmas.
It's on the record now.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I realized that I could publish. So she helped me publish it, and it happened so fast, but I wouldn't change it, for the world, because somehow we managed to get it done. And the book was like 28 chapters, and I had to edit all of them for November, and it was crazy. And then I had to send them to my actual editor and have her go over them again. So the whole process was very sped, but it all worked so well. Only by the grace of God.
Yeah. That's wild. My word. That's an incredible story. And that is so crazy how I feel like God even sends people like in just the right time, even though it either feels sped up or like too slow. Or I don't know if you've had this ever happen where you feel like, God, I'm trying to do this thing and it feels like it's so slow in the process. And then all of a sudden everything happens so fast. And you're like, okay, this is way faster.
Yes.
And like things just click into place in ways that you didn't even expect. And God just brings people into your life or brings people into certain circumstances where they're like, oh yeah, exactly what you need.
Yes, and it was crazy. Like it really did just happen so fast and everything just lined up, because I mean, it was amazing, how fast everything happened, but it was truly awesome. And I mean, it was so entirely busy because we had Thanksgiving going on, and my birthday was like 10 days before the book sale. Before the book went on sale and got published, and it was crazy. And then you have all the holidays that come in that time, and we wanted to get done before Christmas. Somehow we got it done, but it was crazy. And so much props to Miss Kathleen, because she had where the book. So she had, the main reason she did the formatting is because formatting costs a lot if you're going to use your own program. And I did not have the funds to pay anyone for formatting, but she had the program because of her children's books, which she, was publishing. And so she was like, okay, I'll do it for you. Well, what we thought was going to happen was that we could just copy and paste, right? We could just copy the page from the document and paste it onto the program. But when we did that, all of the indentations went out.
Oh, good
It
Lord.
didn't keep any indentations.
Oh.
So Miss Kathleen would add them herself. She went back through my entire manuscript and added my indentations back for me.
My word. God bless her.
I know. And I tell her all the time, I really could not have done any of this. I would have been so clueless. So she actually had me, because I had a mock cover, a little, mock that I got from online, just printed out my book, and more for copyright reasons than anything. And I had to go back through it, and I would send her a picture, and I would say, here's where an indentation needs to go. And I just texted her all of them, and then she'd go add them.
My word.
It was very chaotic. And this last time around, I think we ended up figuring out a way that it would kind of fix itself. But she did have me come over to her house, and I did look over it again, and it took me about 2 hours. I had to go through the whole book and look through every line. It was chaos.
Wow.
But we got it done. And like I said, she has done so much work for me. I'm so grateful.
And that's amazing because you also became a best-selling author, right?
Yeah,
Like through this whole craziness, like the cherry on top is that it actually became a bestseller.
yes, it was absolutely insane. And what happened even is on the day that it went on sale, that it got published, Amazon put it on sale. And usually they do that when they think a book's gonna, do fairly well. And I was very confused. I called her because I really did not know what I was doing the first time around. I'll be so honest. And I called her and I was like, Miss Kathleen, didn't we put the book for this price? And I was like very confused because usually Amazon has a minimum price you have to put your book because they want to make their cut too.
Right.
And she was like, they put it on sale. And I was like, can they do that? She's like, yeah, they can do that. And so it went on sale on the first day, which was really cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing about that is even though it went on sale, the author still gets the normal amount of money.
So they're cutting out their share so that, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. It was
I
very
love
unexpected.
that. No kidding. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause I've had so many of my listeners who always ask me, like, should I be traditionally published, self-published? What does it look like? What's best? What's the route for me? And they even ask me, oh, what are you going to do? And things like that. And so it's just so interesting to be able to hear like about the publishing process and kind of get that demystified because everybody kind of is like, we're good at writing until we then get to the publishing process. And then we're kind of like scatterbrained as to like what works, what doesn't work, and things like that. So I love that you were sharing how that worked for you.
Yeah, because a lot of things they don't tell people is if you're independently publishing, of course it's different with traditional publishing. You still have to know business, but the amount of business knowledge you have to have independently publishing is mind-boggling. I took 2 semesters of business classes and business math, and I was still underprepared. So underprepared. And because I knew that, I wanted to be heavily involved in my book, and I had no idea that route would take me to independently publishing. But yeah, I chose that because I wanted the control, especially as a Christian author. And this is not to say that as a Christian author, you can't traditionally publish. Obviously, most of the big Christian books are traditionally published. But for me, I knew that when you do sign, technically the rights away to your book, you give a lot of room for publishers to change things. And I knew I had what I wanted and I didn't want to change it. Even if that was stubborn, I knew what I wanted and I knew how I wanted things to go. And so that's kind of why I went down that route.
Absolutely. And you don't always have to do it alone, which is something that really stuck out to me in your story because like as you were talking about your publishing process, because so many times we think, okay, if we're going to do indie, we have to do it alone. We have to go it alone. We have to do everything alone. Sometimes finding a mentor or even reaching out to someone who's into that publishing process or who's done that before, sometimes because they know what it's like to go through that, they are so willing. Again, feel like this is going to be a theme of the episode. Ask for help because people are so much more willing to help you than you would believe because they know what it's like to be in your shoes. They know that they would have given anything to have someone help them out through the process.
Yes, and it's absolutely insane. I have the best online and in-person community. Really, Miss Kathleen has been such a major help, and my mom has supported me endlessly through everything, and my dad, he was a big supporter too. And just having that family support and having, also friends that were in writing that, we're going down this path too in their own ways, it was very helpful. It's very encouraging. And I always have, it's so sweet. A lot of my theater family, they'll come to my book signings. I just had one yesterday actually. And I had probably like 5 different, cast members just come, and it was so sweet.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
It really
so fun.
Yeah, it really shows you really don't have to do things alone. It's never, there's always people that want to help you, even if you have to look a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Something that I've been dying to know also, or I know that my listeners are probably dying to know because I already know because I got the inside scoop, but what is the number one thing that you did that contributed to helping you become a best-selling author?
I cheated. I'm joking. I thought I cheated, and that's a very funny story. So when you enter in a book into the Amazon KDP database, and you can, either sign it up for it to go to chain bookstores. Amazon puts it in their databases to be scanned through. Well, mine, it'd been, a good half a year, and mine had not been picked up by anywhere other than Amazon, eBay, and, local bookstores. I'd go to them and, hey, I've got this book. And then also there were some secondhand bookstores online that I'd seen it on. And it was not getting picked up by, the major places like Barnes & Noble's, Books A Million, Second Charles, the places I really wanted to be, Walmart, Target, all those things. And so we realized that sometimes a database is half and half. It's controlled by humans, but it's also a lot of it is computer. And
Right.
computer scan through and pick some stuff. And sometimes you have to really get it out there in order for it to get picked up and to get noticed. And so we were like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, what our solution to this is we need more orders coming in. But also, marketing is very hard, and it's really hard to just get a bunch of orders at once. So our solution was to put the book on Kindle for free for 3 days. And every quarter of the year, Amazon gives you 5 days that you can put your book for free and people can get it. So sometimes if there's like there's reading holidays. Everyone knows they're like little made up reading holidays. I love them. National Reading Day, National Buy a Book Day, National Stay in Bed and Read a Book. There's so many that Bookstagram has made up.
There's a National Stay in Bed and Read a Book Day.
Pretty sure that Bookstagram has made it up at this point. If there's a reading holiday, Bookstagram has made it up. I've seen, every 5 days I'll see some kind of it's a reading holiday. And I'm like, every day's a reading holiday, okay. But anyway, we found one that was very close by. And we went, okay, we're going to, put the book up for 3 days and maybe it'll get some people getting orders. In those 3 days, we got 18 Kindle orders, which was, really exciting. The book really hadn't been out too long either. So it was really, it was really nice. And I really didn't expect it, but Miss Kathleen told me, she's like, you might want to keep an eye out on the Amazon charts because usually sometimes if your book gets a lot of pings like that, it will go up on the charts. And so I was thinking, oh, that'd be cool. My book had already been in like 6 on the chart or something. And I was thinking, if it were really cool, if it would just get number 1, that'd be really cool. That's all I really want. At this point, I wasn't even caring about it getting on Barnes & Noble's. I just wanted that little title. And so that sounds awful. So
Not at all. It's what we all want, really. Like,
yeah,
whether we say it or not.
Yes. Well, through those 18 orders, it did get up there. And it was on let's see if I remember, it was a very long title because when you put your thing in Amazon, you put it in 6 different categories, but Amazon puts it in little categories even more. And this is how, there's been memes like, how is every single book a New York Times best-selling book? And it's like, because they put them in really tiny categories. Like, if you were going to do, like, Hunger Games, you could say, like, love triangle, dystopian, romance, fight to the death, ebook. And there's not going to be a lot of those. So, boom. I mean, obviously, The Hunger Games was a actual bestseller. But,
Right.
this is just an example of how you can narrow down a book's genre.
Mm-hmm.
And mine, for some reason, even though it's not sci-fi or really mystery, it got shoved into the teen sci-fi and mystery ebooks. And because there's probably not that many in that very specific genre in that exact word phrasing, it shot up. And I remember when I saw that, I called my publishing director, Ms. Kathleen, and I was like, did I cheat? And I was like, because that's really specific. And she's like, no, all books do that. And I was like, okay. And I was like, so it's like, this legit? She's like, that's legit. And I was so happy. So it's really just about how specific Amazon gets, because we didn't go very specific with our things, because you can only put in like 2 keywords for each genre. So maybe I put in like Christian fantasy, Christian romance, or maybe I put in sword romance, sword fantasy, whatever,
Right.
or royalty romance, whatever. Very broad genres. There's several of those things that comes to mind when you think of those. But Amazon, they want to make their money. They want to get those little things put out to all the authors. They go, here's a really specific teen sci-fi mystery ebook, because it was on the Kindle.
Yeah.
And it just shot up, and that's how it got best-selling.
That's crazy.
And like I said, I really was like, did I cheat? And even nowadays, when I tell people, I'm like, it was a very specific category. Do not give me too much credit.
But that's amazing. And Amazon was the one that suggested a lot of the genre options that you had, right?
Yeah, so they give you a list of different genres. So you'll have romance, contemporary, fantasy, horror, and then once you have a little computer screen, you'll hit that one, and then it'll drop down a list. So now you've got horror, for example. Now you've got psychological, you've got paranormal, So then you put it, horror, paranormal. But then for like mine, it would have been like fantasy swords, because swords is apparently its own genre now, but that really wasn't an option. So because I put it in those broad ones, it takes those more suggestions and then it puts it in what it thinks will sell. Because like I said, Amazon's business, they want to make money. They're going to put it in what they think will sell. They want you to make money as much as you do, if not more.
As a writer, marketing is essential. But let me tell you, marketing takes time. Marketing does require you to not only understand your people, like the people on the other side of the screen, but it also requires you to, take the time to create a platform and reach out to people and do the things, all the things. So many times you research marketing for authors and everybody's recommending, oh, you need to be on this platform and that platform and this. It is genuinely overwhelming. And on top of that, on top of having to create content for your platform and things like that, you also have to keep up your basic writer things like actually writing books. So easy, right? Well, guess what? I've found one of my favorite tools ever that has been facilitating me and helping me do my job so much faster than I could ever have imagined I could do. Before, it used to take me about 3 to 4 hours to produce one episode just to edit these down. And they weren't really the cleanest. I wasn't completely happy with the way they were being edited or the way they were turning out. Let me tell you, with Riverside FM, which I've been using recently, my work has been so much easier. And guys, I'm not saying this just as a podcaster. If you're a writer, definitely look into actually showing your face and creating a personal brand. Actually, this is something that a lot of millionaires are starting to do. Riverside FM is a life changer because it helps you be able to create content in like half the time. You know how long it takes sometimes for you to even come up with something and then, splice out all the extra stuff that you didn't really want to say, but it came up in the recording anyway. You have no idea how many times just in this podcast stuff was cut out. But thankfully, Riverside makes it very easy for me and for you to be able to create pristine content that absolutely makes you shine with minimal effort. Because friends, your time is valuable. You could be using the time that you're working on your platform and doing marketing to actually be writing your book, or even to work even more on your marketing. If that's something that you want to do, don't spend all your time editing. Why would you do that? You could spend that time actually creating more content for your followers, creating a greater connection. I mean, the possibilities are endless. It truly is endless. And if you're not sure how this system works, friend, don't worry, because this thing, if you can write, and I'm assuming that if you're a writer or a reader, you can probably read and write. If you can use a mouse, if you can use a word processor, you can edit, because this is a text-based editor, which means that it just edits based on what words you want to delete or add. It's really an incredible, incredible tool, web-based, so it can be from any computer or any device. So if you're interested in looking more into this, definitely click the link below so that you can try Riverside for free and get your joy in content creation and your time back.
True.
Yeah, and it's so true. I was listening to another class by another writer, and she was talking about how genre isn't really as writing specific as we think. Genre is really a marketing term. It's the way they market books. And that's why sometimes it's so hard for us to describe. We're like, how do I describe the genre of my book? Does it matter? No, because unless you're doing a copycat version of something, maybe that matters. But if you're doing something original and unique and you find it difficult to explain which genre it is, ideally have a good premise, and be able to explain what the story is about. That's important. That is really important. But if you can't explain what kind of genre it is, that's not a bad thing. That means that your genre is, or like what you're doing is original, and the genres will take care of themselves, or Amazon will take care of it for you, or your publishing house, if you're doing traditional publishing, they'll find a genre for you. But so many times we feel like we have to be cookie cutter, or we have to be like, oh my goodness, I can't write this in my story because my genre won't allow it.
Yes. And I think it's crazy because you're talking about like your genre is not going to fit your book most times. And it's so true, because if I gave someone my book and I said, this is a teen sci-fi mystery. Now, where in the world does royalty and sword fights and poisonings and court mishaps, where does that fit into that? It's not. I mean, if someone told me, like, if I was a reader and I had a friend and they were like, so there's this book by this author and it's called The Darkest War and it's a teen sci-fi mystery. And I read my book and I would be so confused. I was like, you lied to me.
Yeah.
So when people ask me, it's such a mouthful, my gosh, but when people ask me, so what's your book around? This is a genre, but it's also sort of my starting point of my elevator pitch, which is it's it's a low fantasy royalty romance. That is how I explain it. But that's not exactly a genre on Amazon, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's very funny. You're never going to be put in the genre that you think you are, and it's very funny because people ask me, they're like, "So is that like an overall chart on bestseller?" And they're like, "So what did that bestseller what?" And I have to tell them, and then they look at me with such confusion. People that have already read it, and I'm just like, "Don't ask, don't ask."
I love that. Yeah, and it's so true because so many times we think, oh, the genre has to fit us, but no, the genre will just be put on. It's really a marketing term. Like, yeah, try to read stuff that is within your similar,
Yes.
types of books. Like if you have a similar audience, try to see what other authors are doing in that
Yes.
audience, in that, I guess, in that genre, but don't stick to it religiously because it's not writing, it's marketing, really.
Yes, it's like I said, there's so much business in writing that no one talks about. And it's a
Yes.
shame because it's so interesting. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but it's so interesting, the marketing and the business side of things. I mean, even if there's this new like little trend that goes around on Bookstagram, I'm sure you've seen it, where people will market a book, but they'll market it by the tropes.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, this is an enemies to lovers, second chance meeting, forced proximity. And people eat it up. And I'm totally guilty of marketing my book like that as well a few times. But it works. Because people love to know, because that's another thing. Genres, they don't mean what they used to mean. I mean, it's not that easy anymore. And so you can't just go, this is a fantasy, because there are so many different fantasy books. You have to say, so this is like the tropes in the fantasy book. And then you're like, I get it now. This is a chosen one with a friends to lovers. And, you have to make it more specific. I mean, even nowadays, if you say, I love reading classics, a book from the 60s can technically be a classic if you get the book. I mean, like The Outsiders. I mean, it's a classic book, but it's from the 60s. And so it's like, you can say classic, but do you mean classic YA? Do you mean classic fantasy? Or do you mean like we're reading Russian literature? Like, it's crazy. Like, are we talking about like War and Peace? Or are we talking about you read The Outsiders from the 60s? Did you read Oscar Wilde? Or did you read Susan Collins, because she's a classic YA author? You really have
seriously?
I mean, like, if I think of a classic YA author, like, it's classic YA.
Yeah, totally.
Like Hunger Games, that's what I mean. Like, so I mean, I would call her like she's a classic YA author.
Totally, yeah. Because technically the genre is pretty new as is.
Yes. I mean, and I think the rise of like dark academia has really, we know what classic means if you just say classic, but you really do have to zero down sometimes.
Absolutely. That's crazy.
It is.
Goodness. I would love to hear if you could go back several years to young Isabella, who was just starting out writing, trying to find her genre and what she really loved to write and her characters and her voice. What would you tell her to do? What would be some of the first steps that you would recommend for listeners who want to explore this route and, of writing and maybe even self-publishing? Can you break it down into steps? Like, what would you recommend if you could go back and tell yourself everything that you know now?
Yes, some tips. Okay. Well, one thing, learn as much as you can. I remember when I first started writing out, I had my mother's old sewing table as a desk and my old Samsung computer that was so tiny. And I had it on the little desk and I would just watch YouTube videos about writing because I really didn't know much. And I would watch Abby Emmons, Murphy Napier. I would find other famous authors that I didn't even read their stuff. I just knew they were famous authors. So I watched a lot of like Stephanie Meyer and Stephen King, and I would just watch them talk about writing. And I just learned everything that I could. But there is a quote I love from The Perks of Being a Wallflower that's be a filter, not a sponge.
That's such a good quote.
I don't even know if that's original, but I'm pretty sure it is. But, learn everything. He gives in the book, the teacher gives the main character a book and he tells him that this is not a book he wants him to pattern himself after, basically. But it is an important book. And he tells him to be a filter, not a sponge. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that's the gist of it. And that, I love that quote so much. And I feel like if I could tell, young writers just getting into it, or even myself, when I was, first starting writing, is to learn everything and then see what works for you, try it out, see what works for you. And I feel like maybe that was even some part of my problem that took me so long to find my genre, is because I just thought, this is cool, this is popular, everyone loves these things. And I never really I never filtered through it. I never looked at the different possibilities. I just learned what was, what these people liked. And I was like, oh, I should write that. That's what popular. And I think I would really, not that I would change anything with the world. I found my genre in the way I was meant to, the way God meant me to. And but that's one thing. And then another thing would just be to write without fear. Because that is what keeps so many people in the writing block stages, in the stages where they don't know what to write, or maybe they don't like writing for a period of time because for whatever reason they're scared of writing, or scared of, failing, just scared of trying new things with their writing. And I think this is one thing. I did a summit back in August, I think I mentioned, and one of the main instructors of the Young Writers Workshop, Brett Harris, said that there was 4 stages, and he took this from a different method, and I wish I could remember it so I could give it credit, but he taught us about it. It was an already preformed method, I'm pretty sure. Basically, there's 4 different stages. There's unconsciously bad, where you write, and this is the greatest thing ever. Oh, I'm going to be the next best-selling. I'm going to be New York Times. I'm going to be on TVs, and my book's going to be a movie, and you're like, you're 10.
Oh, yeah.
But you have such high hopes for this. You're unconsciously bad. And then you're consciously bad. You start seeing what the objectively or subjective good literature is. And you go, I have a lot to learn. Consciously bad. You know that you're not where you could be. And then from there, you do more work, and you get to, I want to say it was unconsciously good. You start writing, and now you're just doing it for the fun of it. Now you're just trying to learn everything you can. And at some point you realize, I'm getting better. And then the last stage, consciously good, where you know what you're doing is good for your genre, good for what you want to achieve with your writing, and then you stick with it and you just keep growing and learning. Stay in the unconsciously bad and consciously bad stages as long as possible. Like, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that's going to be the most fun years of your writing. Me and my writing group, because we were all obsessed with Hunger Games, we were all the same age, basically, and we were all just getting into it. We'd convince each other to read it, and then we just grew it. Our little group was all reading Hunger Games. And then we would write Hunger Games fan fiction, where we were all in the same game, but our characters, like, we all had different characters in the same plot. And it was very fun. And looking back now, if I read that now, I think I would cringe and die, because it was unconsciously bad. But it was so much fun. Like, you can stress about your bad writing later. Just have fun. Just have fun with your writing. Even now, I'll write fan fiction, or I'll start a random story just because I saw the aesthetic of a movie and I thought that'd be cool to replicate. And I mean, those are fun, but you do get to a point where you start stressing. And every writer has to overcome this, at some point or another, where you're like, everything I'm doing is just not working. And what if this isn't the next good thing that I do? And what if this is a bad project? You have time to stress later. Just enjoy your bad writing. I mean, that would be one of my biggest tips, is enjoy whatever stage you're at. It'll get better. It'll get worse. You'll have seasons of life where your writing, isn't carrying as much as you'd like. And then you'll have seasons where, my goodness, I'm the next best thing since sliced bread. And it's really an up and down seasons of life sort of thing, that many different factors that often have nothing to do with your actual writing, if I'm being honest. So I guess that would be the second thing, was just, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Stay in that little section where you're having your little fun, and as long as you can, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. And then I think my third would be community, which I kind of already spoke about, so I won't stay too long on that. But just make connections. You never know where they'll take you. You never know, where, different connections will lead you on paths of life, and you'll maybe discover different things or different resources that'll help you. I mean, I know now that there have been so many people that have been a part of the writing community I'm on online, and they'll say, my friend had me join. And then they find this community, and it's like, all these connections will lead you different places. And it is crazy to see, because, like, if I had not done theater, how would I have ever met Miss Kathleen? And how would I ever decided to start publishing? It's really just that domino effect. And Community is very important. I know they tell us a lot too, because there was a lot of people at one point who are all saying, shouldn't we be doing marketing for stuff? But they weren't even, published at the point, and basically our instructor's advice was, you don't need to build an online community. You have an in-person community, and you need to nurture and grow that and then move on. And I think that's not that an online community isn't great. It really is, and it's done so much for me. But just community, you can find it everywhere. And even if you think you don't have it, it's there.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love all those tips. They're so good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's so true. Honestly, when it comes to community, like even this podcast has allowed me to meet so many incredible people and learn from them, people that otherwise I probably would never have met. And yet they've been able to speak to me in different seasons of life. Like I was even editing one of the podcast episodes for, I think that I was publishing yesterday, and I'd finished editing it. And it was exactly what I needed, which was crazy. But I'd recorded it like months ago, which was wild, like how it was exactly what I needed for that moment. And again, yeah, like just meeting people, I've been able to connect with them in ways that I couldn't have even imagined. People that I was like, man, I would give anything to meet you. And then I invite them onto a podcast episode and we hit it off like amazingly. Or even some of my best friends, I met them on Instagram, and then I invited them to like a book club that I was doing, and I thought they weren't going to come on. I was just like sending them the link, and then we really hit it off while we were meeting on those video calls. And then all of a sudden we're like chatting every week or things like that, and like supporting each other like crazy, which is amazing. And again, you never know where those connections will take you. You never know how one thing can impact another, or somebody that they might even know that knows somebody else that
Exactly.
can open doors that you didn't even see.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
I know, same. I feel like God uses people in so many beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ways. I've heard a quote, I think it's from, they quote it a lot in Lamplighter Theater. It's this audio drama company. They do audio dramas, and they also sell like vintage books. And one of the quotes that they have is, 5 years from now, you're going to be the same person you were, except for the books that you read and the people that you meet. And it is genuinely so true.
I love that.
I know, same. Well, Isabella, I am so grateful that you were able to come onto the podcast and share all these amazing things with our guests. And I would love to hear, where can our guests find you or get in touch with you? Where are some of the best places where they can learn more about you?
Yes, of course. So I have a website, isabellaruizauthor.wordpress.com. And Ruiz is spelled Ruiz. A lot of people mess it up. And then that has my links to my Instagram, my email list, all my things, my link tree. It has all my things. But yeah, I'm most active on my Instagram, which my handle is Isabella Ruiz Author.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. And again, thank you so much for just coming on and sharing these amazing insights. This has been such a joy.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it so much. This has been great.
I started this episode when we were planning it, when we were organizing it. I started so curious about how to get a best-selling novel. And, it's really interesting because before I was recording this, I honestly was just so curious. I wanted that for me. I wanted to be able to say, hey, I'm a best-selling author, whatever. And it's really interesting because I was working on my anthology, the Novelists in November anthology, as some of you know, that I published recently with Wild Blue Wonder Press. And honestly, I haven't told a lot of people this, but in November, I was thinking about how we could really make this launch a success. I remember I was walking and I was thinking, okay, wait a minute. Okay, if we want it to be a bestseller, we maybe need to lower the price. We need to do these things, do all this stuff. And I was just thinking in my mind and strategizing how we can do all these things so that our launch was very successful. But what I realized as I was walking, I just felt so exhausted by just planning all these things. I was like, you know what? Let me sleep on it. Let me see what I'm going to do. And as the days passed, I just found myself too busy to be able to actually suggest this to my other amazing fellow writers. And I don't know, the idea just fell to the wayside. And then I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the launch, I find that one of the writers has actually posted on our Slack group. She said, hey, guess what? We got to #1 release on Amazon. And I was like, no way. And I felt like the Lord was just saying, see, I did it for you. Like, you didn't have to stress out about it. And so many times we think that to be a bestseller, we have to work really hard. We need to, make this the best book ever. No, the truth is so much simpler than what we think. The only thing that is required to really have a bestseller is to serve your audience well, really. Find the people who resonate with your story. Obviously, let God take as much control as he wants to. But I think the secret to just having a bestseller or a #1 new release or whatever you want is to just be able to invest in your readers and serve your people. Show up and serve your people as best as you can. Yes, write a good story. By all means, write a story that inspires you, that you can't stop talking about, that makes you smile every time you think about it. By all means, do that. But don't think that writing a bestseller depends on you. Because so many times on YouTube, on Instagram, having a best-selling book, we think of these goals, these lofty goals. We're like, we want to have a bestseller. We want to have 1,000, 2,000, 1,000, 20,000 followers. But we neglect the fact that the most essential thing we can do, the most useful thing, the thing that contributes the most to our success with books or whatever in life is actually going to be those little things, the little habits that we can control, not the things that are outside of our control. Because here's the thing, we'll never do the big things if we never take those little steps, which are within our control. We're never going to get that huge crowd that we want on Instagram or on YouTube if we don't post, if we don't show up and do the thing, even when it's hard. And so I think listening to Isabella, I just realized how much of her stories were really about letting people help and doing the thing that she needed to do in that moment. Like at the beginning, she wasn't even thinking about getting a bestseller. She's like, I kind of just want my books to go in Barnes and Nobles. I want them to be able to reach more people. I want, to just focus on the next best thing, like the next thing that I need to do. I think in Frozen, they call it like the next right thing to do. I don't know why that phrase just makes me laugh, but it's true. Just finding the thing that you just need to go do. And so, yeah, I think that was kind of like my takeaway. The big things in life, you're not going to accomplish them by focusing on the big things because they're frankly outside of your control. Let God take care of that. The biggest thing that you can do that will contribute to your big goals is letting God do the thing and doing the little thing that you're in charge of. However boring or minute it might feel. Maybe it means writing one more chapter. Maybe it means if you want to go on that marathon, running outside, 1 mile. If you've never run 1 mile and you want to do that marathon, go run 1 mile first. Do the thing. So that is my encouragement for you. I hope this has filled you up and just inspired you to get writing. Go do whatever will fill you up. Even if that's so simple as, finish that book that you still haven't finished. Go read 1 page. That's it. That's all it takes. I am so grateful for you and for this incredible community that we've been able to build together. And I hope that you have an incredible day. And until next time, continue to live, give, and repeat. And I'll see you next time.